astrologyallan.com, right?
Yeah, it's actually,
ALLAN.
yeah, so we had astroallan.com, but now I'm just Allan. It's just my full name because it ties out with the YouTube and it ties out with the Instagram.
Ah.
So I found a wonderful millennial who's managing it finally, because I'm just not good with all of the digital media stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had suggested that we bought a new URL. So it's just allanvarah.com. So
Allan Varah.
ALLANV like Victor ARAH.com.
Oh yeah, I will put it at the end for sure. Anyway, all
Perfect.
right. So nice. I missed you. It's been a while since we've done something together.
I know. I feel like we should have like a more regular schedule where we talk every 3 or 6 months or something, and just have
because you have so much to share.
Oh,
and we were
you.
really talking about something very interesting before I hit record. Because I think a lot of blog members, a lot of people all over the world struggle with, I just want to like hang out in the spiritual stuff, and I don't want to, like turn on the news and watch about the coronavirus. I don't want to have to deal with my snooty neighbor, that kind of stuff. So it's the tug of war between human and spiritual.
Yeah, and it's perpetual, and we do live in the physical realm, and so we have to take care of the physical body. We have to take care of the mind, the mental, emotional state or body, if you will. The spiritual body or the spiritual self is really the true self. And as we move further into our spiritual awareness, we're less and less affected by what's going on in the physical realm. So you maintain a presence, like you have to understand, like if there is a virus moving around the planet, you obviously want to make sure that you're in a safe place as not to increase your chances of contracting the virus. You're not vacationing in the Wuhan province. Or
no, please no.
You know what I mean? But realistically, like you still have to be conscientious of, your diet and how you care for your body and the company that you keep and the energy around you and how you're necessarily being influenced. If you find yourself completely agitated by watching political news or carried away by fear and anxiety, you have to be conscientious of all of that.
Yeah.
But as you go further and further into spiritual wisdom and spiritual awareness, you're less vulnerable to the happenings on the physical plane.
That is so true.
And that allows you to orient your perspective differently and recognize, not just because it's an internal kind of, existence, and we know that obviously we'll come back and that, we have many incarnations to fall back on and many incarnations to look forward to, but more because the human egotic mind is going to always try to get your attention, and it does really well with anxiety and stimulation and distractions and fear and anxiety. Those all pile into it so well. Yeah. But the spiritual self can transcend all those human qualities and give you the inner peace and the calm that allows you just to be settled, just to be at peace.
Yeah, and the fear, the negative thoughts, law of attraction, you can actually weaken yourself, make yourself more vulnerable to things like including the coronavirus. So
exactly, and that's very true. So so where you put your time, where you put your energy, where you put your attention, that is effectively sending a signal to source or to the universe that that's what's most important to you, and that becomes the manifestation. It becomes a reinforcing of your own trajectory.
Yeah.
So if you spend your time constantly worried about scarcity, I don't have enough, I don't, there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough food, whatever it is, you're going to end up living a life where, sure enough, there won't be enough time or money or food.
Yeah, because you're saying I don't have enough. So the universe is going to be a Xerox machine and literally give that to you. You don't have enough. Or I want to be rich. Then you're always going to be in the state of wanting to be rich.
Well, that's it. And that's basically saying I'm not rich and I want to be rich. So it's not a manifestation. It's reinforcing what you don't have. Right?
Exactly.
And so you start to see these mental patterns that we have. And when you, especially with like meditation and stillness, you can start to put a little bit of spaciousness between the thought or the impulse and the actual belief or the response.
Oh, interesting.
And that's
say that again, because I felt like that was so profound. With meditation.
With meditation or stillness, which are just spiritual practices, you start to become the observer of the human mind, and you start to recognize the thought or the impulse, and then you actually get a break or a pause, which gives you an opportunity to say, how do I feel about it, and what do I want to do with it?
Yeah, psychologists once told me, I was going with a family member who was having a lot of conflict with somebody else. And she said, just pretend like you're a reporter, it's like
Yeah.
you're observing, so interesting, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And that's just it. Be the observer of your thoughts or your behavior, as opposed to the prisoner of your thoughts and behavior.
Yeah, and
Meaning
beware
simply,
what you think. Beware
well,
of your
but
thoughts.
and here's the next piece of that puzzle. Like, whatever it is that you think, that's okay. Like, you can think horrible thoughts or you can think destructive thoughts. It
Hmm.
doesn't really matter what you're thinking. All it matters is what you pay attention to and what you give credence to, which is what I
Oh,
actually want to accept and action on. So if somebody has a thought that they don't like,
yeah.
it's just a thought. It doesn't have any value unless they choose to action it, or unless they choose
Oh,
to genuinely feel that they're lesser than because of the thought.
can you
Right?
give an example?
Yeah.
Maybe
So like,
personal, or it doesn't have to be
um,
personal.
well, so like, I don't know. Like, people have moments of low self-esteem, or they have there's sometimes they feel like if you go to, I mean, it can manifest in a million ways. Think about times when you're at a dinner party and maybe you say something or you feel out of place, or perhaps you don't feel as if you're attractive enough. That's actually a good one. Let's say you
Okay,
don't feel you're attractive enough,
okay.
right? Like, that's a purely egotic manifestation. So you can say, I'm not as beautiful as the person sitting next to me, or I'm lesser than, because of her sense of fashion and I don't share it, or whatever it may be. So whatever you believe your level of attractiveness is, that's just in your mind. And
Yeah.
the mind is going to do whatever it can to always kind of grab your attention. And so in Eastern philosophy, they call it the monkey mind. And the image that I always liked is, think about a cage full of monkeys that are always rattling the bars.
Oh my
And they're
God,
doing,
that's me.
and they're doing everything they can to grab your attention all the time. And so if they notice that when they say you're not very attractive, like, oh, we're not very attractive, that gets your attention, then all day, every day, you're going to start to see images or instances which are reinforcing in your mind that you're not attractive enough. And
Okay,
all you're doing is you're feeding those monkeys bananas every time you pay attention to it. And then
yeah,
maybe you go and you buy something to say, well, this will make me more attractive. Or you go ahead and, I don't know, you seek, some externalization of it, which is looking for praise or looking for somebody else that's going to validate you. So you talk to somebody else who also doesn't feel they're attractive, and they go into, you go watching, I don't know,
yeah.
reality TV, and it brings you down to that space. You're like, well, I might not be attractive, but they're even less so, like, and you start to create some hierarchy in your mind. Whatever those examples are, it's nothing more than the egotic mind doing what it can to grab your attention. And that spiritual practice is giving you that spaciousness to start recognizing that those are the tendencies of your mind, and to say, here it goes again, right? What do I want to do with it? And it's actually with love and acceptance. You can say, you know what, it's just my mind, for whatever reason, creating these thoughts. There's nothing wrong with the thoughts. There's
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm not trying to repress them. I'm not going to add negative intention to try to repress or to belittle the thoughts that my mind is by default throwing off. I'm just going to choose not to go ahead and pay them that much attention.
Yeah, you could say, this monkey, what sex are you? Yeah, okay, okay. You would be a terrible pet. I'm going to have to put a collar on you and
And let it
whatever.
go.
I mean, yeah. So
And
just
so if
observe
those,
each thought and,
that's exactly it.
okay.
If the monkeys are constantly rattling the bars and you just keep walking by and don't pay attention to it, or if you get into some of the neuroplasticity, which is like the rewiring of the brain,
Oh, yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
some people, and I have worked with some people, they go into a meditative, like, they literally see when their mind, especially if they're really stressed out or really anxious, and whenever it happens, they literally just find their center. So they might sit and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes. I have one woman out in California, actually, that she puts on classical, like Baroque music. Whenever she finds herself, she goes into a hyper judgmental state where
mm,
she's just never good enough. And so
yeah.
whenever that happens, she just puts on the music and it shifts her energetic space just slightly enough that she's trained her mind that it knows whenever she's hyper judgmental, she's going to be able to pull out of it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and all that you're doing is rewiring or training the mind to say, when those monkeys are rattling the cage, just keep walking by.
That reminds me of the Soul Happy technique, and I don't know if you know about that, but y'all can go to soulhappy.com and find out. But one of the components, I mean, they have some EMDR components
Yeah,
and visualization. It's very complicated, but it's so easy. It's like 20
yeah,
minutes a day for a week or something. And but then you also have a smell that you associate with a thought,
yeah.
and
And
also tapping on someplace, touching something. Anytime you have a negative thought that
yeah,
seems to be recurrent, smell, touch.
and
So
those are even more sophisticated techniques. Like EMDR is a good example of it, or like I've done a lot of somatic work, which is basically saying there might be a trauma or something that is stored at the soma, at the somatic level, which is the
cellular
cellular
level, yeah.
level,
Yeah.
or it could obviously be somewhere. You can have all sorts of like PTSD, and people don't realize that a trauma is really just experiencing something that was more than the nervous system was capable of handling in that moment,
Yeah.
which is why kids get so easily traumatized, because their
Yeah.
nervous system is underdeveloped. But you can be
Oh,
in a car accident, you could be chronically stressed out from work, you could be in a terrible relationship, and we'll talk about how relationships over time can wear you out and become in their own right quite traumatizing.
yeah.
And the body and the nervous system, all it wants to do is keep you safe. It doesn't really care if you're functional and healthy from the exterior, like social
Oh, I
standpoint.
see.
It
Oh,
really just
wow.
cares what it has to do to keep you protected.
That's fascinating because remember reading this book, Taming the Tiger or something like that. It was about,
Yeah, it was.
PTSD.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
that's
know all these
that's.
books.
I know all
God,
these books, so I'm a reader. That's releasing that. That's the I'll remember his name.
it's
Releasing the
okay. I
Tiger.
won't remember 5 minutes after you tell me anyway. But anyway, so he said how PTSD can be caused even by a
Peter
tonsillectomy.
Levine.
Yes,
Peter Levine.
yes.
By
But even,
tonsillectomy,
yeah, even a
medical
tonsillectomy.
traumas, medical
Yeah.
traumas.
And a
People don't.
child.
It is so hard. Think about a child who's full of anxiety, and he's being told that they're going to cut into his throat, and they have to go and
Yeah.
fully sedate him, and he wakes up, and he's got so much pain that he can't barely swallow or eat for days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like medical traumas are right up there, and we don't even realize how sensitive the body is, especially in a child when they go through these things.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is that years and years go by, and it's not at the conscious level. You can't get to it by talking about it. You could go to a therapist your whole life, and it wouldn't be able to get into these traumas because you don't even have awareness that those traumas exist.
Because it's down in the cells, maybe even the
Right.
DNA. I don't know.
So it would
You have
be
to have somatic
it's
kind of
it's
stuff, right?
it's the primal brain. It's the nervous system. It's at
Ah,
it's the oldest part of our developmental cycle. It dates
yeah.
back hundreds of millions of years.
Wow.
It's the instinctive part of our being that says, okay, something severe happened that traumatized us. We're going to go ahead and modify your behavior for the rest of your life to make sure that you're not in that vulnerable position
Mm,
to potentially relive that kind of circumstance.
yes. Interesting.
And so if you had a challenging upbringing, you had a difficult family environment, you're just piling more and more of these protective measures which are being stored in the body, and now you get into your 20s and 30s and your whole relationship life is actually being dictated by those traumas.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about relationships, but also what makes it even more complicated wrinkle is the fact that these traumas can somehow include bleed through from other lives, past or future,
Yeah,
and like maybe in another life at the age of 20, blah 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 happened, and then all of a sudden you start having all sorts of problems. But
well,
here's what you wrote me in an email of what you wanted to cover. I'm taking relationships, both family and romantic, compatibility, and a soul's intention prior to and during incarnation. I think it's great.
okay, that's a good subject. I love it.
It is. Hey,
I
you
love it.
thought of it.
And,
You're all that
and,
in a bag of chips, dude. So tell me, where do you want to
well,
start?
so well, so it's like, when we get into the spiritual journey, you try to reframe the discussion as much as you can to orient from a spiritual perspective, right?
Okay.
Which is, okay, the human perspective is we show up, we live 70, 80 years, we die, and that's the end of it. Fine. The spiritual perspective is this is just a little stepping stone on a very long journey. And
Yes.
if we continuously incarnate and go through many lives, we can say, well, maybe I have one or two things that I just want to learn in that life. I want to set aside, a certain priority for that incarnation.
Yeah.
And we can learn through all sorts of experiences, but relationships are hands down one of the best opportunities.
Oh God,
And
yes.
and
They are
and
so complicated because it involves free will on both sides, and yeah,
and also
and past life relationships and blah blah blah.
well,
Okay,
and
go
that's
ahead.
just it. So no, it's beautiful. So the spiritual space does everything it can to try to understand it a little bit more, and then when you have a really good handle on it, see the incredible growth opportunities, and of course, maybe even get to so far as to say, I see the intentionality. Like I see why this relationship is unfolding. I see the spiritual value in this relationship, meaning the way my soul is actively progressing through this incarnation.
Oh,
And
it's
so
so
that's where
hard.
I know. So we think about it, and you can start to break down these relationships because they fall into, these are just general categories, and they're kind of my categories. So, there's nothing proven, so to speak, and there's a lot of shades of gray. But you start to reflect on these different relationships that you've been in, and I put them into 4 categories. It's my girlfriend's language, but she calls it the basic bitch relationships, which are just the generic ones where your intuition tells you almost immediately that the relationship is of limited potential. And usually it's just kind of filling your time and you're kind of fumbling through it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
maybe it's a little bit indulgent. You might be juggling a few of these at once, but these are the simple,
Are they? You talking
forgettable.
about sexual, intimate relationships?
Yeah, these would be
Okay,
romantic
I
relationships,
got it.
right?
Got it.
So we can start with those, and then we can move into the family space as well, because there's all that intentionality around how you contract with the family and what roles you're going to fill.
Yeah.
So I would say your 4 types of relationships would be your basic relationships, your karmic relationships, your soulmate relationships, which is just a nicer way of putting it. And then they call it, it's more of an spiritual urban legend, which is twin flame relationships.
Yes.
All right. And so the basic relationships, these are like a dime a dozen. These come and go. Maybe you date for a few weeks or a few months, but it never really gets true momentum to get liftoff. It doesn't ever really lead to much, but it's more of
Okay.
you're going to have a lot of these when you're young, and you're going to have a lot of these in between more meaningful, deeper, committed relationships. All right. And those because instinctively you just know that the potential, it's, even if you're attracted to them, the timing is oftentimes off, or the chemistry can be off, and certainly the intellectual qualities that you need for good quality conversation, it's almost like you're reaching a little bit. So you're just trying, but it's not quite there. And they can go on for a while, but they're just filler relationships. And it almost always means that you're at a stage in your life where relationships are not intended to be your priority.
Okay.
All right. And people don't realize that there's so many other things that are intended for them to focus on. And if they're spending too much time looking for a relationship when it's not their timing, it's just not going to develop. Right.
Got it.
The second type of relationship is a karmic relationship. And a classic karmic relationship it's at a spiritual level, which means that these 2 souls did choose to come down together, and they chose to get involved, but they chose to get involved in lessons that would they can be really intense love affairs. They can really have a lot of chemistry, but the relationship itself never quite gets to that beautiful, loving space that they can hold on to it and really revere as something incredible.
Yeah.
And so I say that because in a karmic relationship, you spend the bulk of your time trying to get the other person to change.
Oh God. I tried that with my husband, but he is still Mr. I have spoken. No, I love
Yeah.
him. He's great. But no,
Yeah.
so we're talking about romantic relationships, right?
Yeah. We're talking about
Okay.
romantic ones.
Only these
These
four
are
are all
these.
romantic.
Yeah. And
Okay,
we'll
got it.
transition into family-based relationships afterwards.
Okay.
But yeah, because and so romantic relationships was obviously, if they're successful, lead to marriage and then kids and become the family unit. If you're in a karmic relationship, and I often say it like, don't marry your karmic partner because you'll spend your whole marriage trying to change the person. But
Interesting.
a true indication of a karmic relationship is oftentimes more of a roller coaster based relationship where it has its ups and its downs, but it's conflict oriented, expecting or needing change of the other person, and externalizing the pleasure or the joy that they seek, which is, we're not working out because he doesn't do this, or we're not working
Oh,
out
wow.
because
This is fascinating.
yeah. And so that's your second level. Those are ubiquitous, and those are all growth oriented. And those are two souls that have contracted to come down and say, I'm going to bring this energy and these struggles and challenges. You'll bring this energy. And we're going to go ahead and beat up on each other to try to teach that lesson, when at the end, the most powerful lesson there is acceptance, which
Oh,
is
so there is a lesson.
acceptance.
It's still valuable, right?
It's still
All of
quite
these.
valuable.
Good.
Yeah, it's still quite valuable to struggle, but it's quite valuable. It's actually a little bit what you just said, which is, like you said, you accept your husband basically. Like, you get to a point where you, even though the individual, um, maybe they try, maybe they don't try, maybe they become the person you want them to, but in all likelihood they never do, you can still accept them for exactly who they are.
Yeah, it's like you first meet and it's like a brand new pair of Jimmy Choos, which I would never buy. And oh God, they hurt, you get blisters, but over time they break in and they're soft and they're just most comfortable shoes you have. So, and
Yeah,
that happens to be worth, I mean, just take a lot of work and compromise and acceptance, little mini
yeah,
acceptances. I accept this part of you, you accept me, this part of me, etc.
that's it. And so that's the grand lesson in the karmic relationships, is to move into a state of acceptance.
Okay.
Right? And
Yes.
then the third relationship type, which is, it's often termed a soulmate. All these are soulmates insofar as they're souls that have decided to come down and to be together. But
Okay.
a soulmate relationship has romantic connotations because we think of souls that are just destined to be together,
Ah,
and they form something really beautiful. A soulmate relationship still has a lot of learning, and because it's still in the human form, there's always going to be struggles. There's always going to be they're two separate individuals that still have to come together and figure their stuff out.
yeah.
But what's different about a soulmate relationship is it motivates you to want to be the best version of yourself.
Oh, wow.
And so if we think about a karmic relationship, that's you projecting out to the other person, you need to change, you need to do this, I need you to be someone different. And the karmic partner is usually either very stubborn or they're projecting back onto you what has to be changed. Soulmate relationship is exactly the opposite. This relationship is full of love um, and pure in its intention. It actually lets me want to be the best version of myself. It motivates me
That's what I
because it's
that's what I tell people. Boy, if you want to find somebody that you want to have a love relationship, make sure it's one that it stimulates you to be the best. I say this exactly, the best version
the
of
version
yourself.
exactly it.
And that
And
could be
so,
true with that was my case with my kids too. I
yeah,
wanted to be a better person for them, so it spills over into platonic things as well, I guess.
right. And so, and it does, because you can think about the parents that are always beating on their kids to try to make them more into the way they want them to be, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
accepting the individuality of the child. Like, I hear that all the time when people say, I had to go down this career path because it's what my parents expected of me,
Oh,
or
that's like the
I've had,
karmic relationship, but platonic, but
but
parent child.
exactly. So the same general manifestations end up showing up in the family unit as well.
Yeah, wow,
And
interesting.
I know. And so when you get into a soulmate relationship, you just want to be the best version of yourself, mostly because you love that person, but also because you go into a state of service, which is, I know that I can bring the most love and I can cherish this relationship if I continue to work on myself to make that possible.
And that
And if
takes
you're,
self-love and finding a path to uncovering your authentic self,
well, that's
which
it,
we do,
which
which
means
we have a hard time finding if we don't love ourselves.
so, and we have to recognize that the human egotic mind is going to be protected and defensive, and it's going to be resistant. And so,
Mm,
with your spiritual growth, you can actually see when that's happening and say, you know what? I don't always need to be right. I don't always need to be heard. Like, I don't have to be somebody more than I am. I can just be in a state of love and acceptance for whatever his needs are or whatever her needs are, and then go ahead and deprioritize me in an effort to meet what it is that they need most.
right.
And if you get into a partnership relationship where the other person is prioritizing your needs, you get this wonderful synergy where two people come together and each other is the priority. And that's true soulmate connection or true soulmate bond.
Well, obviously, where does the saying come in? put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
No, first tend to your own needs.
That that that, that so
So how
that
does that
that
work?
that so that whole concept is if you're like if you have a health challenge or there's something extreme in your life and you can't possibly be in service to another person, you can't
Fix that first.
completely overlook your own personal needs. Like
Right.
so like the Cancerian female, for example, is notoriously a nurturer and it can be a little bit needy at times. There are a lot of examples of Cancerian mothers who have gone so far to actually sacrifice their own well-being or give up all their financial health or completely consume themselves with the needs of their children or their partner at their own expense.
Yeah.
And so
I
they
got you.
end up creating an imbalance. So they haven't put on their own air mask. They've gone ahead and just said, no matter what it takes, I'll take care of the person next to me. And all the while they're suffocating
That
under
makes
their own
sense.
decision making.
Yeah.
So that's where that expression comes in, because it all does come with balance.
Yeah.
You know, but and when you think it through, I can be in a me-based relationship where this relationship is all about me, right? Which is narcissistic or self-absorption, which is what am I getting? Are my needs being met? We can be in a we-based relationship, which is, are we prioritizing the relationship? Where do we want to go on vacation? Where do we want to live? What's most important to us? And then you get what we're describing here in a soulmate, which is a you-based relationship, which is your love and happiness is the most important thing to me. And the other person turns around and says, well, your love and happiness is the most important thing to me.
How
And so,
beautiful.
yeah, you're genuinely and to get there, you're always looking for opportunities to grow and improve self so that you can show up more completely for the person you're with.
Oh, I love that last sentence you said. Gosh, that's very profound.
Well, thank you. I like our conversations.
Oh gosh, it's amazing. It gives you shivers, that one.
You know, you and I have very similar astrological energy.
I know, I remember. Actually, I was wondering, wait, he said something was similar. Was it he and Erik or was it me?
Yeah,
He and I, but yeah.
it's you and I, because you're on the cusp there. You're a fire earth cusp.
Uh-huh.
And I happen to be an earth sign with half my chart in fire. So we have similar
Okay.
manifestations. Yeah,
That's
energetic
awesome.
manifestations. And so the fourth type of relationship, just to mention it, you don't see it too often, but there is actually some validity to it. They call it the twin flames. It's this concept that the soul actually split into two separate bodies with the hopeful intention of actually reunifying in the physical realm. So the masculine and feminine find each other and they come together. And because they're part of the same soul, it's a really bizarre union where they actually are automatic. Like it's just like, oh yeah, this was always meant to be. And they start to see all these bizarre personality traits, behavioral tendencies, weird habits, like all of them are almost identical. And
Wow.
yeah, and so they talk about that. There's not as much growth that would obviously happen if you're just coming together and you're kind of the same soul and you just reunified. The urban legend says that if you're on your very last incarnation and you've just chosen to come back more for the indulgence of the harmony of the masculine and feminine, you can go ahead and create some type of environment like that. There is
Kim,
also,
oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
there is also this belief that as we evolve, as we go much deeper into our incarnation cycle, we form what's known as a social memory complex where many, many souls actually start to come together and they create such harmony because their growth is dependent on the wisdom of other souls. And so they can still break off and incarnate separately, but because they've amalgamated energetically, they have a ton of familiarity with each other.
God, that's
And so,
fascinating. Because
yeah.
I was told yesterday, or maybe it was on the radio show, that Erik, yeah, it was on the radio show. Pamela Erlin said that Erik was melding with a big collective. And I can't remember why. I need to listen to that again. I
Oh,
hear things that goes in one and out the other. But also Kim Voigt told me that Erik and I are twin flames. And there are weird things, like we have the same initials. Our birthdays are exactly 6 months apart. We had a lot of similarities, but the growth of each of us had to happen after we were on different sides of the veil. So I guess it's not just romantic.
no, so, and that's it. So it's easiest to see it in a romantic context because it's so
Yeah.
pronounced, but it
Yes.
can play out in friendships. It can play out in family, like you were saying earlier. You
And
know,
it,
it can,
yeah.
it, we have genders here in the physical realm. The soul is a genderless entity. It
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
it has the polarities. So it
Mm.
shows the masculine, feminine, the negative, positive, the strong, aggressive, outbound kind of determination versus the introspective, more nurturing, more internal energy, right?
Yeah.
So all that polarity is what governs the entire incarnation cycle and the universe. But
Yeah.
here in the physical realm, we think of it as male, female, right? We think about, the
Right.
unification of it differently. Um,
Exactly. But I was told
um,
that that's why I grieved so deeply when Erik died.
you know,
More than all the other, and they grieved deeply too, but because we were twin, oopsie, hang on, twin flames. Oops, my volume went down,
so
sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. It is kind of interesting. So tell me a little bit more. So you were told that he's amalgamating with other souls at this point?
Yeah, collective. I can't remember.
Yeah, like a social memory complex, the collection or
Yeah,
the
I think that's
imagination.
pretty much it. And there was a reason for that, but anyway,
Yeah,
it's in the last
because
hour of enlightenment.
yeah, so
Yeah,
the earth itself is now evolving into a higher consciousness plane. And
yeah,
so the incarnations that are happening from souls that are also at that same level of consciousness.
yeah.
And so for many years it was what's known as a third density consciousness. Now the earth just now, it's a very long cycle, but it's just now entering fourth density consciousness, and the beings that will arrive in fourth density consciousness will be part of a collective, will be part of a social memory complex. They'll be coming together to accelerate their growth into their spiritual intention. And so if you talk about Erik, he's becoming part of a social memory complex. It means that he'll be preparing for his next incarnation as a fourth density being. He'll be part of a well,
A
he'll be
mob,
part of he'll be
flash
part of
mob.
it'll still be a physical body, but they'll start to experience things that we would have thought to be only possible in the metaphysical. So
Oh,
access to past lives, the ability for telekinesis, which is communication through the mind, potential for levitation, for example, as the
oh
body gets
God.
lighter and lighter. So that's what ends
Like
up
David
happening.
Blaine. Oh my God, I love that guy.
And
David Blaine, so cool.
yeah, with the magician.
Yes,
So that's all what I'm talking about is all what ends up happening as part of the next level of
I gotcha.
incarnation cycles
Yeah.
over the next, it's a long cycle. It's a 30 million year cycle, but it's just
Oh my
underway
God.
now. I
Wow.
know. Well, we just finished about a
I don't. I
75,000 year
I
cycle.
don't have that kind of time, Alan.
You
What?
have you have eternity, my
I
dear. You
know.
have all the time in the world.
Eventually, I want you to hopefully speak about how we can use astrology to to pick our relationships, to assess our relationship, to get the most out of these relationships, whether they're
Yeah.
karmic or whatever.
Yeah, and so I always get myself into trouble. So I'm going to throw out the very first disclaimer, which is
Join the club.
yeah, you and me both. So any two signs can make it work. All right. So that means that you can always transcend your astrology.
Oh,
There's,
yeah.
we have an energetic imprint, but if we're determined enough, we can pick mismatched energies and still have compatibility. That said, there are some signs that just naturally go better with other signs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you
Right.
look at your whole chart, you have to look at the composite. You have to look at all the energy in the chart. The sun and the moon speak to the conscious and subconscious. It's also the masculine, feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to find harmony there. And then when you get into the way we love, Venus is the expression of love and beauty. Mars is the masculine intention. It's also kind of the determination. It can be, sometimes it can even show up as like sex drive, and it can show up as aggression, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hunt, if you will. And then the Mercury, which is our intellect, our communication style.
Oh,
So when you find a good partner, there's alignment, or at least an understanding of those different areas.
okay.
All right. And so because you have different elements, you have earth, water, air, and fire. Earth holds water, and air provokes fire.
Mm,
And so
that makes sense.
if you look at your chart and you say, okay, I'm a heavily an earth sign, for example, you get along fine with other earth signs, or you can hold a water sign.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when they look at the statistics around it, like male earth signs, like a male Capricorn generally holds on very well to a female water sign, like a female Pisces,
Okay.
because she can be the emotion, the water, which is fluid, and he can be the stability or the grounding, which holds it.
Can it be the opposite? Does it have to be the females that and the males that, or is it more
It's
tricky?
it's so it's more it's a it can be the opposite, but it's much harder
Oh yeah.
because, and this is just my experience, when I see a male water sign, always want to pair them up with another water sign,
Yeah.
because if I see a sensitive, emotive male water sign, Scorpios are different because it's governed by Mars, so it's a little bit stronger. But if you're looking at like a Pisces or a Cancer, if they're male, they're going to be sensitive. They're going to be a little bit more emotional. They could be more delicate. And if they get involved with a female Earth sign, she might be um, strong and consistent, which he would enjoy, but she may end up feeling like she has to wear the pants and may have to be more masculine to compensate for his more feminine emotional tendencies.
Well, is the part of that a social component? What we've been trained to,
Yeah.
uh, how society has trained us how to be a female, how to be a
Yeah.
male, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we're covering a lot of ground. So you have four different levels of compatibility. There's nurture, nature, the chemistry, which is what we're speaking of in the astrology. And then you have the age of the soul, which is your spiritual aptitude or how far you've progressed.
Okay.
So like nurture would be how you were raised, your cultural environment, certainly the imprinting from society.
Mm.
And then nature would be your biology. It would be like your IQ and anything that's physical.
Mm-hmm.
And then chemistry, which is what the astrology is trying to point to, is the energetic piece. And then finally, the last one is being how far you've progressed on your spiritual path.
Right.
The more of those elements that you have in alignment with a partner, the greater your compatibility and potential for intimacy, which
So
is
no
like,
wonder it's complicated.
it's so complicated, which is why when somebody's like, oh, I just want to find like that one person, it's like, well, if you're using like a swipe app, all you're really looking at is nurture and nature. How tall are they? Where did they go to school?
Yeah.
How old are they? Like what's their cultural background? You have no idea what their energy is, right? Which is defining the chemistry. Like there's some people you desperately want to jump in bed with, and other people, no matter how attractive they may seem when you talk to them, something just seems really off and you
Yeah.
just don't connect with it. And then the fourth one, which is your spiritual growth or progress, that just speaks to how evolved your consciousness is.
Yeah.
And a lot of that speaks to your judgment, your intuition, your prioritization, your priority structure, whether you're more selfish and motivated by the determination of the material mind, or whether you're more expansive and understanding kind of the bigger workings at play here.
And
But ultimately,
how
yeah,
much work you've done in these incarnations. I guess it's not really chronological, like I'm this many years old. It's like,
no, how far you've progressed.
okay, okay, right, got it.
How much you progress. You could have somebody who's been incarnating for thousands of years who's relatively stuck because they can't seem to get past the blocking spot.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that just move very quickly through their
Mm.
incarnation cycle. So like if Erik is now moving into his fourth density space, in his next incarnation, his only compatibility will be with others that are at that same level of consciousness.
I see. That
So
makes
he
sense.
could kind of dummy it down and be with somebody who's not yet at that level, but the connection would always feel a little bit lacking. It'd be a little bit weaker.
Yeah, so that explains your disclaimer that it's not all astrology. I mean, there's other three parts that can make an unmatched astrological thing work, and vice versa. That's fascinating.
Exactly. And so when somebody prioritizes too much of the material, like if they prioritize the person's career or their income or their social status in society, they're almost always going to come up a little bit disappointed, oftentimes because they're overlooking the chemistry, and then they don't necessarily know that they're even at the same level of their soul's journey, right? One soul may have progressed so much more than the other that even if they're attracted to them based on what they can see on paper or visually, there's so much more at play that they haven't accounted for.
Yeah, that's why people say I've outgrown him or I've outgrown her. Is that or partly?
That's exactly it. It's because they're progressing even through this physical life. They're progressing through this journey, and their partner may not be moving along with it.
Yeah. Or it could be that, okay, we honored our spiritual contract. We were meant to have this child and move on. We were meant to learn, I was meant to learn self-empowerment and things like that. And then, boop, done.
And that's it. And so it could be a singular lesson, or it could be a series of lessons. And once those lessons are learned, they release the agreement, meaning that they can now move on to something else.
Okay.
You could also have the grand lesson being coming into acceptance for a failed relationship, or letting go of that which has run its course. And so
I see.
sometimes you have a soul that incarnates with a deep fear of loss or fear of abandonment. And so they incarnate into a really volatile household, and then they end up finding a partner who they hold on to specifically because they're afraid of being left again.
Yeah.
And their deepest lesson, and then he'll end up leaving them, for example, to force them into that space where they have to learn what it's like to be on their own 2 feet and to be by themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
and so
tough.
like, and so this is where the introspection becomes so powerful. If you know yourself, if you truly understood your trigger points, how you react to them, how your mind operates, all the different stimuli and provocations around you, then when these things are unfolding, you have the wisdom, you have the capacity to actually see them for what they are and not be reactionary, but more be spiritually minded and understand the growth and the lessons at hand.
Yeah, you're the observer.
You're the observer. You're
Not
no
the
longer
gladiator fighting in the pit.
That's it. And you're no longer the victim, right?
Victim. Yeah. It's like, well, I'll tell you anecdotally, my parents were so horrible. I mean, 3 of us kids escaped to be homeless. The beatings were so bad, broken bones, blah, 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 and emotional abuse. And, you know, for a long time in my adolescent and young adulthood, oh, it's like, oh, poor me, poor me. But then I decided to, you know, say, well, there's got to be value in this. And I did. I figured that I learned how to be assertive. And I knew this must have been a contract that we played together, but he went overboard, my father. Overachiever.
Yeah.
And to be more nurturing and more compassionate. And when I was able to discover the nuggets, the golden nuggets, I was able to be grateful for it and release the suffering. And then and I envision myself, instead of a pawn being pushed around by external circumstances on a chessboard, I could raise myself up to a perspective of a chess player. I'm the one moving those pawns,
moving the
nobody
pieces.
else.
Right.
So that was a huge change for me. And
even if you're ultimately on the board with those pieces, but now you're actually seeing it and you can have control over how it unfolds.
Right.
And so they talk about that. There's basically 4 kingdoms of spiritual growth. Where most people are stuck is the first kingdom, which is the victim complex. This is happening to me.
Yes.
You know, like, look at my difficult childhood. Look at how terrible my dad was. Of course, I'm stuck in this shitty life because of everything I've been through. I hate my boss. I hate whatever. It's victimization. The very first step of spiritual awakening moves you to the for me complex, which is, this is happening for me. This is happening for my growth. This is happening for my awakening. This is happening for my benefit.
Is that what happened to me when I realized there was something valuable in that?
It's exactly what you're describing.
Oh, okay. Wow.
You could have been the homeless person who never overcame it and was always the victim her whole life because of her difficult upbringing. Or you can be the empowered soul who said, wow, I may have even contracted with my father. Granted, he got carried away, but I probably contracted to be in this tough environment so that I can actually overcome early stage adversity and go on to become a medical professional, go on to, you know, become an online, I don't know, influencer, or go on to a healthy relationship, go on to a beautiful family, go on to become a part of the community because of everything that I've learned and the courage that I developed through that adversity.
I thought I was in the remedial class all this time. So what about the third kingdom? Or you might not be finished with this one.
Yeah, no, that happened for me. It's okay. I'm long-winded. So that I appreciate you moving me along. So that happens.
No, everything you say is so powerful. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So this happens to me, victim complex. This happened for me, which is the growth empowerment complex, the state kingdom of empowerment. The third kingdom is, this is happening through me, which is, I have gifts and talents, and I recognize that I'm here to share all that is, and I want to be a channel or a mechanism by which this can all flow through me.
And that's where you are.
Well, I like to think that at times I'm there, but I oscillate between the second and the third kingdom mostly.
Okay.
So I have glimpses of third kingdom, especially you become a bit of a channel, and you can tap into a little bit of universal wisdom, and it taps in with your own intuition, and that allows messages to flow through. And then everything that I'm saying, like, it's not me, like Allan, who knows these things per se. There has been some lessons in this physical life, but a lot of it is just the wisdom that's flowing through me from
I
even
see that. That was on my whiteboard as a thing. I feel like some of these really powerful things you're channeling from your higher self, perhaps, or universal
yeah.
wisdom. It's really incredible.
Yeah,
Really.
and so I think, and so it's, like, we all have the ability to tap into that space and to allow these gifts to flow through us, this wisdom to flow through us. And it's particularly enhanced if you're in a state of service where you're doing it with magnanimous or generous intentions to help others.
Yes.
Right. So if you're like Edgar Cayce is my favorite psychic. In his incarnation before he was Edgar Cayce, he still had psychic capabilities, but he was at the gambling table and he used it to make a ton of money.
Oh,
And so in his next incarnation, he had to come back to make amends for that. And he went
yeah.
deeply into service, and he helped heal like 14,000 people through medical readings. Right.
Okay.
And so if you want to go into a state of service, then you have a much higher likelihood of tapping into the energy that's necessary to bring through those gifts in the fourth kingdom.
Okay.
And then the third kingdom, excuse me. And then if you're curious, the fourth kingdom, so this is happening to me, this is happening for me, this is happening through me. The fourth kingdom would be the I am, which is the universality of recognition and understanding that we're all part of one, and you can actually feel the connection to source. You can feel the source energy existing within you, and you no longer feel a separation between the people around you. You recognize the universality of
That's
our
like
existence.
Jesus and Buddha stuff. Are you kidding me? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Sri Swami Svatmandana teaches that. He teaches how to people to not only intellectually know, yeah, we are all one, we're all whole and part of God, but to actually live as such.
Well, that's
So,
it. And so you need spiritual practice to be able to move yourself through these kingdoms. And it's like if you were running a marathon, you wouldn't just get up tomorrow and just start running 26 miles. You'd be training and training and
yeah.
training. And you'd be training in your exercise, your nutrition, your stretching, your sleep. The same thing is true about a deep spiritual practice. Some of us can get there sooner just because we've made further progress in past lives, so we can tap in more readily. But when you speak to these monks, you speak to other deeply spiritual beings, they're putting a lot of effort on a regular basis into moving forward their spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And so if you have an intention of getting into the second or certainly the third or fourth kingdom, it's because it's become a priority in your life.
Yeah.
You
That's
know, like
amazing.
it's hours every day that moves you into that space.
Well, you can't have 5 kids and do that, but I'm going to put that on my little list anyway. Maybe I'll put it right under get the mail or bathe the dog. Practice living as one. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. So for the easiest thing to do in that case is to move into a state of stillness on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So, and it looks different for some people. Actually find it in yoga, which is beautiful. I find it in meditation. There are other people that will just literally just go out into nature and sit there for hours on end without a phone or a distraction or even a book. And it's almost as if they're trying to talk to the trees, and they just sit there contemplating thought and watching it pass by. Whatever it is that you desire, you need time to allow the human mind to quiet those bars in the monkey cage, to have to quiet down enough so that you can see it more clearly and allow you to tap into a higher consciousness.
And like see your thoughts. It's just a river flowing through you.
Yeah, I like to think of them as clouds passing by in the sky, and almost like you can choose, you just see them as clouds. Sometimes you pay them attention, but it's really not for any other reason than just to be in a state of calm and tranquility.
Yeah. Wow. That is amazing. You know what would be so cool? I don't know if the time zone might be a problem. It'd be so cool to have you on, as a guest on the radio show, especially to talk about for anything. We could have several shows, but the Four Kingdoms thing, that's just
great. And that's the Agape group came up with that years ago. I think that's brilliant because you can always see where somebody is in their journey based on what kingdom they're in.
Yeah.
And you know it right away when there's a victim complex and you're like, yeah, you know what, they're just in the first kingdom and that's okay. It just
Yeah.
means that they're suffering more.
Yeah. I sure was there for a long time. So
Well,
of
every
course.
time you transcend to the next kingdom, your human suffering diminishes considerably.
Oh gosh, yeah. And you can develop more and more compassion when you look at the people who have just been through the kingdom you just, struggled, dug yourself out of. You don't dig yourself out of anything,
Exactly.
but whatever. Then you can have more compassion. And sometimes people who are victims are so annoying and energy vampires, but
It's because they're
I think that,
suffering.
yeah, they're suffering. And sometimes those who are the hardest to love are the ones that really need it the most. So we should not
And
forget that.
and that's just it. And so it comes back to your statement earlier. You still have to put your mask on before assisting another, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody is really destructive and suffering terribly, you do what you can, but you don't do it to your own detriment. You still have to
No.
find balance and harmony in that
Yeah.
relationship.
Exactly.
And there are many people that are incarnating with quite a bit of karma, and so part of that suffering is their journey to balance past lives, in
Yeah.
which case it doesn't matter what you do, they're still going to suffer until it's been completely eviscerated, until
Yeah.
they've really dug in and torn it out.
Right. So don't
And
let a toxic relationship tear you apart. You can't just, disconnect from them and just send them love and light. Just send them healing
and,
energy. Just whatever you need to do.
and the best example of that is drug or alcohol addiction.
Oh God, yeah.
And so if
Oh.
somebody's in a relationship where their partner is an addict, and especially if they're clean and their partner is an addict and they're trying to support them and trying to help them, but their partner has whatever karma that still has to be cleared, so it's going to come through the suffering from addiction.
Yeah.
You really have to be careful of how you protect yourself as not to get sucked down into that addictive state and everything that comes with a really nasty addiction.
I know. Oh. And a lot of times those people have negative entities attached that just need to be disconnected. But that's
That's
a
because
whole nother topic.
that's a whole nother topic. You've lowered your vibrational energy with excessive drugs and alcohol, and that makes you susceptible to
Yeah.
negative entities to come in.
That's right. Wow. Okay. Well, I still want to talk to you after I stop the recording about a couple of things. But anyway, you guys, look how amazing this guy is. I mean, God, pearls of wisdom, bam, bam, bam.
I,
So you know how to tap into universal wisdom. I don't know what it is. It's incredible. But hopefully
yeah.
you guys will visit his site, Allan Varah. I'll put it right here. Don't worry. I'll spell it
No,
out.
it's great.
And I will also put it in the description box.
You're the best.